Quick little replay review for drsen. It's down here. All right, you're gonna spawn arm, back canyon. You're gonna go triple max 1 wind. Okay, good. Wind is high, so that's the right choice there. You shouldn't e-stall when you make this max. Wind keeps going up. Gonna Q4 wind. I like this so far.
Game paused. Game
Quick pause on
started.
pause. All right, all right. You actually could probably make the lab with the wind this high, but it's all right. If you want to make the fourth, it's a little bit more optimal once you're above, like when you're at like 70, if you're making a pot lab, to just make the lab. But this also is okay because you're protected against it dropping. What our first unit's going to be. Two cons. Okay, I'm all right with this. I think this is so far a pretty good start, relatively optimal. Immediately gonna boost this con. Where is he going? It's gonna take both of those mexes. Okay, good. Good on E. Wow, this wind has been very generous to you. We are gonna get our second con, and is it building wind or taking that? It's taking that and then building wind. Okay, that's good. You might actually want to have the wind start there instead of having him lock there, but it's like a minor thing. All right, and then you're going to go into pawn. I don't necessarily dislike pawns here, but I feel like if you're going to make early fast units, I would actually think it's better to make ticks and go be aggressive with them. Because if you need to make units defensively, you already have the defender's advantage. Meaning that if you see units coming here, you'll have radar and stuff, and you can just produce units to go and fight them. But if you produce ticks, which are cheap and way less energy as opposed to pawns, you won't be e-stalling, and you'll be able to scout, apply pressure, and respond to other scout raids. One of the problems with going grunts or pawns is that they're a lot slower than ticks. See, ticks are 132 and pawns are 87. I forgot the speed of grunts. They're 82, I think. So what can happen, unfortunately, is you'll have pawns and you'll see ticks run like this, and then your pawns will go and chase them, but the ticks can still kind of dance around and just like run around all your stuff. So a lot of times to fight scout units, you actually don't want to go pawn, you want to go tick instead. The second reason why is because if you look, you're already e-stalling, right? And you're not even generating any more metal than you would normally right now, or any more energy, because he's going to be burning E for this and this, and he's going to be burning E. So instead of trying to dump a lot of early energy into pawns, I think it makes way more sense to just drop a couple of ticks, and then from there maybe drop a few more cons or something else. The other thing is that if you look at pawns, see how pawns are 1420 BP? Ticks are 800, and your lab has 100 build power. So if your commander isn't assisting it, you still make a tick every 8 seconds, which really isn't that bad. And that frees your commander up to make energy, which you need right now, because right now you're really e-stalling. Like your commander is boosting here, but it's somewhat meaningless. Okay, and good, you recognize that. So you start making a solar, which is the right call. You actually could probably make wind here because wind is high. Wind is high. What's going on here? Make sure you finish the first one. I wouldn't have even dropped the solar because see how you're starting to run out of metal now? It makes way more sense for you to keep spamming wind because wind has been high. It's somewhat complicated to explain, but wind is more likely to end up at the extremes of its numbers, meaning that if wind is low at the beginning, it's much more likely that it'll stay low for a longer period of time. Conversely, if wind is high in the beginning, it's much more likely for it to stay high as opposed to drop. So because wind has been high and you already don't have a ton of metal, I think it makes a bit more sense for you to actually just spam wind here instead. Because this is 300 metal, right? And this 300 metal is going to produce 40 energy or 30 energy, right? Whereas your wind is going to produce 64 energy and it's only going to cost 148 metal. So yeah, that's why. No, it is 40. Sorry. It just wasn't fully open yet. Minor nitpick here, especially with your commander early, you always want to queue a bunch of actions. So it's like an easy thing to do if you want is like you build these two and then you hit shift and just rally him back onto your lab so that if nothing else, you're still using his build power. And that's true for kind of like any constructor like this, right? Like you can have him come and take this mex and then build that. And then afterwards, just shift queue him so that he boosts the factory. And then that way, even if you APM stall, your constructors are still doing stuff. So you're going to send your pawns up to the front. I would say in this situation, you might be overbuilding starting units a bit because it doesn't look like you're fighting or scouting with them. And I think you probably could have instead just done like 5 ticks and then another con or another 2 cons, which would help give you a little bit more E among other things. Okay, you had your commander eat a little bit of the rock here and then come back and boost the lab. This is a little bit of a greedy thing to say, but I think relatively early, it's fine for you to get a res bot because there is a ton of metal that you can reclaim, right? Even just next to you, there's 197, which more than pays for the Lazarus, right? And if you can get some of the other metal up here, like that's whatever, 200. And if you're pushing up to the front, right, there's tons of metal around here. There's 90. If you can get to the front, there's like the 160. I think it's totally fine because you're not in a immediately contested position for you to drop an early Lazarus to start eating this metal to kind of smooth out your initial production. And later your Lazarus will just end up on front and he can be repairing or reclaiming or whatever. Gonna swap into Rocket Bot. Okay, so you're playing essentially a straight front position. You're gonna start walking your comm forward. I would probably burn through a little bit more. Well, I guess you have this contour in mind. I would say maybe you want to drop a few more wind before you go up, but I think this is fine. Small nitpick. You guys don't have any radar in here. And it's kind of just a good thing to always get in the habit of. Like you want frontline radar 100%, but you always want radar in your base as well. For a couple of reasons. One, like up here, you want radar for like bombers or anything else that's coming or even raids that are coming. But later on, especially versus things like cloaked commanders, if you don't have a radar in your base and there's a cloaked commander, he can literally just walk like this and then just kill your base. And a lot of times you will have radar on the front, but radar is super cheap. So it's a good thing to get in the habit of just like having a radar somewhere near your main base just to avoid that. So see here. Oh, I was going to say that guy's going to raid, but he's not. He's coming back to defend. All right. And then we're producing rocket bots. The wind has been at 16 this whole time, right? You as ARM kind of don't need to go asolar unless the wind has just been awful and has stayed awful. But it's totally plausible for you as an ARM player to literally just go wind into fusion or advanced fusion. In this situation, I would probably just have this con just build wind like this around that nano because you'll get more than enough wind and you'll be fine, right? Your kind of breakpoint for that is you want around 400 to 500 energy once you get your T2 con, so that you'll have enough to upgrade your mexes and everything else. But keep in mind, A-Solars, especially ARM A-Solars, are insanely expensive and take a really long time for them to pay themselves off. ARM A-Solars are 5KE, which is just awful, right? Like, you're going to end up e-stalling probably when you're making this. Maybe not. Yeah, so you're slowly e-stalling here. You really don't need this, and you don't want to spend this much metal on it either. Like, this is 370 metal for 75 energy production. This is 250. Well, one of them's not even built yet. So this is less than 250 metal for 96. A better thing to do in this situation is to drop like an early E-store, right? Oops, it's an M-store, an early E-store, and then just spam wind. It's much more efficient, especially as ARM. Core has better solar, A-Solar, tidal, but ARM has better wind. And on a map like this, where the wind has been high and it has a great average wind, just spam wind at the start. All right. These guys have just been chilling. I think it's much better if you run them up and spread them out just so that you can respond to everything else. But your comm's coming up to the front, okay? So this is awesome. I would probably have multiple cons doing it, or have like a nano, like nano and then con building wind, nano and then con building wind. Sorry, nano is construction turret. You don't want to commit this much metal into solars unless the wind is awful. But especially as ARM, I would say on a map like Glitters, you can just straight wind tech. All right, commander is coming. He's going to build a radar there. One thing I would recommend, especially when you're in Canyon, are high ground radars, because they give you awesome LOS as well. So your commander can totally build a radar like right where, like right there. And it's highly unlikely that it gets killed anytime soon, right? And it still gives you great vision, like all the way there. Like, yes, this radar will give you a little bit more, but if it gets attacked, it dies. Whereas like a radar here is much safer, and it'll just give you great vision before you push up. And you always want to have radar. You're going to come up and take the mechs. Okay. We are still committed into rocket bots. Okay. All right. You have these queued, which is awesome. And you're starting to eat your B solars, which is great. You understand like, hey, these are less useful. I can just turn them into A solars. As a general rule, I would always try to get E storage before you start converting for a number of reasons. One is if you have a wind economy, you want E solar as, or energy storage as the buffer. You also want it for com play for things like D-guns, right? D-gun is 500 energy. Cloak is 100 if you're standing still, 1,000 if you're moving. Right now you can cloak for 1.4 seconds. If you have E-Store, you can cloak for 7.5 seconds, which is huge. Also, what a lot of people don't realize is like E-Store lets you leverage your energy economy to build stuff that's way more expensive. So normally if you're building something that's like really E heavy and you don't have E-Store, you just immediately run through your energy bar. You know, like let's say you're building something that's whatever, 500 energy, right? You burn through it in like 3 seconds. Well, a little bit more than that, right? Because you have energy producing. But if you have E-Store, you have like 10 seconds and you're still generating that energy while you're burning it. So you can actually build stuff that's way more expensive as opposed to just building normally like this. But the main point of what I want to point out here is that you're building a ton of energy production and you're not even using your energy production, right? You should either be converting this or doing something else with it. Otherwise, there's no reason for you to be making this much E and not have that many units on the front. So you had these pawns here. They need to go up and see what's up here because we don't know what's up here, right? Like you kind of have them. You kind of have them a little bit back. You need to run up here and like see what's going on. You need to know what those are. You need to know what those are, because there could be situations where like, well, that's an incisor, you know that, right? But like, if this is nothing but incisors, you might not want to keep making rocket bots, right? Or like, you know, if it was something else, I mean, rocket bots kind of counter a lot of T1 land, but regardless, there are situations where like maybe you want a Centurion, maybe you want something else, right? Maybe you don't just want to be spamming Rockos. The point is that if you don't see what's here, you don't know what's there, so you don't know what units to make. Second, which I had said before about like having long queues, you built this and your con chilled for a little bit, and now you're building that. Especially with your commander on the front, just queue up a stupid number of things, right? You can be like, oh yeah, build that, build one here, build one here, build one here. Maybe build, you know, a converter on the front because I'm still overflowing, you know, maybe build a frontline radar, maybe build, I don't know, AA. But like you can queue up a bunch of stuff with your commander and just have him going to the front. And then when you're doing other stuff, he'll still be expanding forward. The big thing here, right, is if possible, this is sort of the dividing line in your lane. This dude hasn't secured these mexes yet. While an LLT there is great, if you can push forward and deny these mexes, it's awesome because your ally has his 3.2 mex, right? This is 3.2. Here's the opposing 3.2. So if you can get up here and put an LLT, and your LLT can shoot and deny this, it means you guys are in an economic advantage. And all you need to do is just walk your commander up a little bit. All right, let's see. So we got some pawns. We see these guys moving forward. These are grunts, right? Or these are pawns. Oh, homie needs to degun. Okay, so this is an awesome feed from yellow. So you have radar, right? Like you guys have radar. Yellow just threw away a ton of units, and pink and or whatever that is, maroon and pink are over here and they're chilling. Look at what's in front of you. Literally nothing. So right now you're porking. But you could just go da, da, da. And best, you know, like worst case scenario, you build LLTs and you deny these. Best case scenario, you can build LLTs up here and you can actually take these for yourself. So we don't feel obligated to like pork the front line where the quote unquote front line is. Like your ally is farther ahead. If anything, you want to be up here so that he can't get attacked like this, and like this, right? You're kind of leaving him out to dry, and you're not taking mexes that you could take if you wanted to. So just try to be a little bit more responsive to the front line in these situations, because you could totally probably either deny or take those. And you've got Rockos, which is awesome. Ton of reclaim up here, and he's got a Centurion. I like it. All right, you're going to walk up with your Rockos. That's good. Now you're building. I said it before, but I'll just say it again. Generally speaking, you always want to have an E-store before you start converting. And on glitters where people tend to overbuild wind, I think it's great if you have an E-store and you can even overbuild converters a bit more than you would need, just because people generally underbuild converters on glitters. And so you can, with an E-store, you'll get more energy overflow, and then you can likewise convert more energy overflow, which is awesome. It's almost 6 minutes. You're not making units. I think that's the right call. You're also not immediately being pressured. So you might want to consider just right now eating your lab and boosting your tech player, right? Around 5 minutes is, generally, well, unco-opt tech will be somewhere between like 5 and 6 minutes generally, if they kind of have an idea of what they're doing. In those situations, it's great for you to just get a T2 con as soon as possible so that you can up your mexes, because that's big. But also, your commander's on front anyway. You don't want a lab here. Think about how long it's going to take, like, especially a rocket bot that's pretty slow, to meander all the way up to the front, right? What makes way more sense is if your front is relatively safe, you can just drop a bot lab here, right? And then if you do need units, you can just immediately make them, and your commander can boost that lab, and you can eat this, and you're completely fine. Anyway, takeaway there, 6 minutes, start looking at your tech players so you can start feeding metal. So this is what I talked about before. If you had LLTs here, it's a lot harder for him to just swerve over and start attacking. But regardless, this is still pretty good. So you come up, you recognize, hey, I can actually start taking and defending this. Awesome. And you're going to start chipping away, which is great. Oh, we're going to... Little bit of rough micro there. Oh, this guy better not lose his comp. Okay. So Beamer can fight relatively well into Rockos, but it's not that big of a deal because once you have enough Rockos, you can just step forward, shoot, back up, step forward, shoot, back up. And like with 5 Rockos, I think it's like 3 volleys, even if the commander's repairing it, and you'll just kill it. One big thing here is you always want to repair your frontline units. So an easy way to do that is like after you've built this, just turn on repeat and then just do an area repair. It's just kind of a big area repair. Do an area repair like this, and then you'll always repair your hurt Rockos as long as they're in that area. The only thing to be careful about with that is like if you degun and repeats on, you'll just keep degunning the same spot. But that's an easy kind of low micro way to keep your units repaired because it's something you really want to do. Again, like you built this and then you built that and then you built that and then you built that. Like just queue all the things, man, right? You queued this one, just be like, oh yeah, LLT, you know, AA, probably want a frontline raider because you want the LOS, you know, just queue a lot of stuff with your commander. It's totally the right thing to do. All right, you weren't using this lab. Anytime you're not using a lab, you just want to get rid of it. I would also say a couple things here. First, don't keep building A solars. They're bad, especially on this map. I would get probably 2, maybe 3 nanos, and I would eat this and then just get ready to go T2. You have 490. If you give your homie the metal right now, you'd have T2, and I'd also probably buy a transport so that you can fly your con over immediately. The only reason you might still want this is because you want to have a bunch of T1 cons that can follow around your T2 constructor. So in that case, maybe build 3 or 4 and then eat the lab. All right, so you're fighting Brute Wolverine. You got to repair these. No. See, if you had repaired him, he wouldn't have died right there. Okay, so this isn't that bad. You can still kind of chip away. The one thing that you really want to do when you're fighting rocket bot into vehicle is your rocket bots are going to outrange everything except for whistlers and artillery, right? So you kind of have to play chicken where your rocket bots, you're going to fight command them forward so that they can shoot, but you need your commander relatively close because as soon as these vehicles turn and come at you, your whole rocket bot line needs to back up and your commander needs to come up here and he needs to degun. Medium tanks are horrible against commanders because even though they outrange them, when they have to turn, a lot of times the commander can close in and degun and kill them. So it's kind of this weird battle where your rocket bots are chipping away at everything. And as soon as the vehicles try to commit into you, then you need to degun. But all in all, not too bad. All right, I like this radar. This is great choice, great choice. Make sure you're repairing and you also want to reclaim that. One other thing is you kind of threw away your pawns a bit, but a great thing to get in the habit of is to have like a few pawns or a lot of times even better, like say 10 ticks and just have them chilling in the back. Because if we look, right, like pink is here, yellow's here, purple's here. There's like a couple little dots here, but there could very well be like almost nothing here. And you might be able to run ticks up and kill a lot of stuff, you know, like a lot of these mexes. Like if we look, okay, yeah. So So just as an example, right? If you had say 5 ticks right now, you could run up, you could 100% kill that. You could probably run them up. I think you could probably kill the vast majority of these mexes, and you could probably even split and have, you wouldn't know that there's a commander there, but you could have one tick like run up here and start sniping wind while you pick apart these. But the point is, like, because you don't have ticks and because you're not probing, you don't know, right? This is like the freest front ever, and we just don't know because we're kind of not aggressive enough and we're not scouting enough. So a good thing to kind of get in the habit of is just like keep some scout units behind type of thing, even if it's just a few ticks, and you can just send it forward, because this is totally a situation where you could just butcher this dude's economy and he would have like no recourse. Floating a lot of metal, I already said, send it to your techer. And I would normally get 2, like I'd probably get 2 or 3 nanos, and then I'd be spamming wind, like spam wind here, spam wind here, spam wind here, spam wind here, spam wind here. You could have like 2 cons, 3 cons, because you're not in a super active fight, and burn a bunch of metal on wind, and then just keep this area for your eventual fusion, you know, advanced fusion farm. Okay. I don't mind the pork, especially because you're securing this mex. Make sure you always eat this on a contested thing. Dragon's Claw, also good. Something that you want to get in the habit of doing is with declaws, put like 2, do like this. You can do 1 or just do 2 rows of walls in front of them, because like versus rocket bots and a lot of other things, the declaws when they're down are low and the shots will hit the walls. And for some other direct fire stuff, they'll just hit the wall in general. Always make sure you take the mechs when you're in a situation like this. I would also probably jammer. Whoa, what is this guy doing? It's a little bit of feed from your boy, but not the end of the world. Maybe spread these out a little bit more. The other thing you can do, if you don't want to do the walls in front, right? You could do like a wall like that, a wall like that, a wall like that. When you do them like this, if you're just going to have say 3 here, you should also just put random walls down, because if you only have these 3, then they know, especially the enemy artillery is like, oh, these are all lightning turrets, and they'll just shoot and kill them. But if you scatter like walls here and here and here and here and here and here and here, not only is it harder for enemy units to like rush through, but it also means they don't know what's a turret and what isn't a turret. And so it makes it much more difficult for them to push. It's also like a huge psychological thing, because you could have like 1 laser turret and it'll fire, and you could have like 30 wall segments, and they'll be like, well, one of them's a laser turret, there's probably more laser turrets. And you can totally mind game the enemy into thinking like, oh my God, I can't break this, it's some like insurmountable pork. But really it's like, you know, like literally like a single claw with like 160 metal and walls scattered around it. So try not to use claws independently, try to put walls with them is the real takeaway there. I would also say, because you're fighting artillery, you want to jammer relatively early, right? Oops. You want, and you want a sneaky peek, you know, probably like a little bit farther back, like here maybe. 1, so that it's harder for artillery to hit, but also it's 8 minutes. Very high likelihood that T2, well, first good players, high likelihood that T2 is coming soon. You need the cloak to be able to cloak degun your enemies. You can't right now anyway, because you don't have e-store, so it'd be an exercise in futility. But in a perfect world, you want e-store and you want a jammer on the front against artillery, and then also so that you can cloak degun T2. This is painful. Please never do this again. The wind has been so high almost the entire game, and you're building an incredibly inefficient source of energy, right? This is 2,220 metal for 375 energy. This is 740 metal for 265E. Let's see who's spammed. Can't. Right? Here's 2100 metal. It's 700 energy. So literally, if all of this metal was in wind, you'd have basically double the energy production. Also, your goal should never be to asolar scale. Your goal at this point should be around 6 minutes to get a T2 con and bring it over, and you can just go fusion, right? A fusion's 4K metal. Once you upgrade your mexes, like if you after you upgrade your initial 3 mexes, you can just drop a fusion blueprint, and then your nano turrets and base can build it, and then your T2 constructor can be like la 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 la, right? And you can go upgrade all your other mexes. But past like 600 or 700 energy, you can't be making asolars like this. You're just going to want to swap into fusions instead. We already talked about eating those. We talked about a jammer. We talked about other walls. I, as a general rule, would also say get just a little bit of anti-air on the front, you know, even if it's just like a few SAMs. It denies Shuris that are going to stun your defenses. It denies scouting, and it'll help against bombers. A lot of times if like bombers are coming or fighters are coming or something, it'll deter them a little bit. Or if your air player and their air player end up fighting here, like if he's sending fighters and bombers and your air player responds with his fighters, if they end up fighting over your AA, a lot of times you can help your air player if they're gapped, right? Like if your air player doesn't have the same eco, or if he lost figs to something else, or if he's mismicroing or whatever, if you give safe spaces for your air to fight over, it's always a good thing because it means that you can help your air player. And on a map like Glitters, it's a great thing to do, especially early. Your biggest issue right now, from everything I'm seeing, is really just economic management. You needed a T2 minutes ago, and you even had the metal for a T2 minutes ago, right? You just now bought it. You probably could have bought it at 6 minutes, and you could have transited over, and all of these could have already been upgraded. Second thing, a transport's like 68 metal. Just buy a transport, right? Just buy a transport early. It's never a bad thing to have, especially like when your lab is this far back. If you wanted to make a Centurion, it'd probably take a minute for it to walk to the front. If you have a transport, it's like 15 seconds, right? So just get in the habit of always buying a transport. And you can also like move nanos. You know how you built this nano here? You could build a nano in base where it's safe and then fly it up to the front. And if the front's dying, you could use your same transport to pick up this nano and then fly it back. It's also super beneficial later on if you don't have air cons and you want to say Pork Canyon. You can pick up your T2 constructor and you can fly him, say, here or here. And even though he's a bot con, you can build rattlesnakes up on the hill. And then hill rattlesnakes have just like insane range, right? Can't select him. Where's another T2 gun? We can just look. I can just show you. Right? A hill rattle, like here, look at how much area it denies. I mean, you can build them here too. It's a little bit sketchier, but like, you know, you could totally fly a con up there and you just dominate that whole area, and that it's relatively safe as long as there are units in front of it. Right? And so as a general rule, just try to get a transport and get used to playing in transports. And I would stop making T1 units at this point. You aren't really getting pressured, and it's getting to the point now where, okay, hold on. Do you see all of that? I think we are looking. There's so much reclaim here. You have to contest it. We don't want any more T1 units, especially because all these units are going to take so long to run to the front. You just want to go T2. You want to scale. You want to go T2, like build T2 units as well. All right. You saw this huge fight up here, and there were Shuris that kind of stopped it. Just run your commander up and take all of that. That's 700 metal, right? 800 metal. You totally could have just sent your comm up and eaten more or less all of that. What's defending it? Some shit you can easily degun. Instead, pink gets all of it, right? So always try to secure as much reclaim as you can on the front. And then also we want to repair the homies. This thing really far forward, probably not recommended. Even if you want to pork, I would pork farther back, because I feel like it's going to be really hard for you to hold that whole area. Okay, where's our T2 con? So incorrect energy production, one thing. You're also overcommitting to T1. At this point, you just don't need T1 units anymore, right? It's going to be really hard for you to actually break through with T1, and it doesn't make sense. So I would build like 4 T1 cons, and then you just select the con and right click on your T2 con, and your T2 con is going to upgrade these, right? And then generally speaking, you want to build a fusion, drop a fusion blueprint in your base, and then you want to take, your other mexes. You can come up and, is that yours? You can kind of like send them up to the front and everything, but you have build power here because you have nanos. You don't have build power at these other ones. So to make sure you can up all of your mexes quickly, you want to get a bunch of T1 cons so they can just follow your T2 con and you can build everything quickly. The other way to do it that's like really APM intensive is if you buy like 4 transports and then you build like 4 nanos and you fly your con to a mex and drop the nanos and build it, and then fly your con to a mex and then transport the nanos. But it's way simpler if you just build like 4 or 5 bot cons and you just right click and they'll just follow him around and boost him so you can upgrade all your mexes quickly. All right, let's speed up a little bit here. All right, I don't know why you're piggybacking these up, but look at the map, right? It's like this. You're trying to push with rocket bots, which rocket bots don't fight well into any other unit. The only way they're like on open ground, the only way they're really able to fight is when they have pork like this to retreat to, or if there's a commander babysitting them. But even this far forward, a commander is not going to be able to do that much. For you to push forward with rocket bots, you need a bunch of LLTs or other defenses here, because otherwise they can just get run at. A bunch of ticks, like 20 ticks, which is way less metal, will just kill all of these. You can't push exposed like this. The bigger issue is if we look at the map, right, which I kind of drew before, you guys are pushing up here and like, it's awesome, that's great. But over here, these guys aren't pushing. Right? These guys, like, they have a little bit, they have some units up here, but like there's all this stuff here and it's free. It's not getting attacked. So what do you think is going to happen when your army comes up here? You're going to fight him. You're going to fight pink, and brown can probably come over. You're just going to get like 1v3 because you don't have support, right? These guys are free to rotate. So if you do want to do a push like this, you need to make sure your allies are pushing, or you have to have like an insane overwhelming force, and 12 rocket bots is not an insane overwhelming force, right? There's so much stuff here. Look at all the stuff here. There's no way for you to try to pressure this at all. It makes way more sense for all of these to just back up. Stop. Okay. This goes back to queues, right? You upgraded all of these. That's awesome. Oops. Drop. You could actually, with your energy, you could probably AFU, but it's safer if you just drop a fusion. After you queue those, drop the fusion and then upgrade these. And then, you could even like, just on a map like this, I'd probably drop like an anti-nuke after that. But you're building T1 units 12 minutes into the game, never do that. There's almost no world where it's a good idea to build T1 units 12 minutes into the game unless they're like pawns, ticks, resbots, or AA. But rocket bots generally lose all usability past like 8 to 10 minutes. One, because medium tank balls will just get so big that they can just kill them. And then two, if these were competent players, you'd be fighting T2 units already. And basically all T2 just like rips apart Rocketeers. Hounds kill them, Fiends kill them. If they do like Mauser, Sheldon, Tsar, all of those things destroy rocket bots. You just don't want them. And like we talked about before, these guys take forever to get to the front. So there's just no reason to. Okay. You need to cloak. All right, good D guns. If you had cloaked, you probably could have killed all of them and not died, but that's how it goes. Whenever you're fighting, always try to think about the reclaim you're going to leave behind. You never want to do a big push like this if you can't secure the reclaim. You guys are just throwing away like 2,000 metal that you can't secure, and your commander's dead here now too, and they can probably secure, well, maybe they can secure it, I guess we'll see. But just fighting to fight isn't really a good idea. Like if you're chipping to deal damage and apply pressure, that's cool, but actually throwing away units is a big deal, because if they eat this metal, it'll just snowball back and you'll end up dying. We need a T2 lab. We need that. Also, this whole game, you've just been like overflowing energy. You want way more converters. All right, so you're able to eat your commander. You're just overflowing it to your team. You could have built, okay, so you are going to build a fusion. You could have built this fusion a while ago. You could also just have dropped a T2 lab. Yeah. All right, and we're going to draft the fusion now. Oh, are you going to go straight Aphis? What's happening? Okay. Fusions are awesome, but I would say you never want to build an Aphis until you've upgraded all of your mexes, right? You're leaving so much metal on the table. You're going to build a converter now, which is huge. This converter though, like if you look at the numbers of them, oops, 600 energy a second. You literally need like 3 of them instead of just 1. So your team is super happy that you've just been pumping them full of energy instead of using it, but you don't want to do that, right? You want to drop a bunch more converters. If anything, you could have dropped a bunch of T1 converters earlier and that would have been better. You could just go like literally T1 converter and a bunch of wind and you'd be in a much better spot economically. I would also say that because you had nanos on the front, I wouldn't have built the nanos up there, but you could build nanos there and then just build your T2 lab forward here and then pork your front, right? Build rattlesnakes, build pit bulls, do all of that. So right now I'd say your biggest issue is really just like kind of just eco management. I feel like you've made some weird aggressive decisions, but mainly this is just going to come down to economics. You're eating your A solars. You're still stalling on metal. You've been stalling on metal forever and you've just been wasting E, and you're literally about to make an Aphis, which is like a ton of E, and you still aren't converting it. Like, eat your lab, eat these A solars. You don't need that. The wind will carry you through it. Like, your wind is almost a fusion, right? Right now. Oops. Your wind is almost a fusion is 1,000 energy a second. Oh, sorry, core fusions are 1,100. 1,100 for 4,500 metal. Right? For like 2K metal, you're at 800 energy. The A solars should have gone, but we'll stop harping on it. And then you're going to go Aphis. Okay. So here's like a Tsar, and you don't have anything on your front. So this is a situation where it makes way more sense for you to upgrade these, drop the fusion blueprint with your T2 con, and then have these guys finish the blueprint. And then this con could have just gone like duh, 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 and then walked all the way up here. Or you could have even bought another T2 con and flown him up here. And then you could have porked here. Whenever you're playing front, once you hit T2, it's incredibly important to build defenses. These are all kind of scary, right? But I'm not even kidding when I say one rattlesnake, a jammer, and your commander cloaked right here can basically stop all of this, because it outranges all of those hounds. Rattlesnakes destroy hounds. It outranges the Tsar. And if you have a jammer, your commander can just be cloaked right here. And if the Tsar comes up to try to kill it, you can just degun it. But you kind of threw away your commander because you were like insanely aggressive early. You don't have a T2 con and you don't have anything else kind of on the front. So that's kind of one of the downsides of the build that you did here. You need to upgrade. Like, you've been M-stalling forever. If you had these other mexes upgraded, you wouldn't be M-stalling, right? Like, just look at the difference in these mexes. 3 mexes for 5.5 metal a second, 3 mexes for 22 metal a second. You always, as soon as you get to T2 cons, you always want to upgrade those mexes. You'll see some players like MBT at some points will have like 10 T1 cons slaved to his T2 con because he needs to get all those mexes up as soon as possible and then get it up to the front. Okay, I'm gonna speed it up a little bit and then we can kind of talk about unit counters, because I feel like a lot of what I talked about. All right. What are you fighting? You're fighting hounds. They have a lot of hounds and they have a Tsar. Tsars and fat boys are some of the best counters to hounds in the game. So you don't want to be making hounds. If anything, you might want to make like a couple spy bots so that you could emp these units, or you could make snipers to outrange and kill these units. Or what'll sound funny is the best thing that you can make versus all of this is just drop like 3 T1 bot labs and just run ticks at them. 2 lab or 3 lab tick spam will just kill all of this. There's nothing they can do against it. The Tsar will kill all of its own allies. All the hounds will have to swap from plasma to Gauss like this. And even then you can just hug them and you can kill them. And the rocket bots are useless versus ticks as well. You can just zerg them down with ticks. But against that, this kind of makeup, if you don't have a rattlesnake, which would just instantly deny all of that, you can go spy bot and then self-detonate it to land emps. You can go sniper. I wouldn't go fat boy here, or I would say like tick spam is probably like the easiest thing to do. But you don't really want to make hounds, right? You're making hounds against someone who already has more hounds than you. And he has a Tsar, which is like one of the stronger counters to hounds, right? Like, yes, they have the same range. Hounds are 650, Tsars are 650, but Tsars do 900 AoE, and it's a huge AoE. Look at that AoE, right? So like, if a Tsar is firing into here, look at all the shit he's gonna hit. And hounds aren't that tanky, right? It's like 2 Tsar shots, maybe 3, depending where they are in like the AoE, but you can just like destroy hounds with it. So it doesn't make sense for you to go hounds here. Alternatively, the high ground rattle that we talked about before, absolutely destroy that shit. As a general rule, I'd say after your first fusion, try to get in the habit of making anti-stealth and anti-nuke, just because you never know what's going to happen. So it's nice to have as a counter. Okay. So still spamming hounds into the Tsar. So he's going to start spamming ticks. There are some whistlers and stuff, but maybe he's not spamming ticks. Oh, I thought he was. Well, let's see. So see, that Tsar was shooting at the tick and it did like 15% HP to the other Tsar. Now we're upgrading. So this is the great idea. It's just like 10 minutes late and you just need more cons on it. But otherwise, good idea. Tons of reclaim here that we would really like to get. And also remember, you want to try to pork your front. So he has a rattle and the rattle is just going to like destroy all these hounds, although it might be getting shot. So see, the rattle here is just denying your stuff. And then so this is exactly why I say, like, you don't want to make hounds here, right? Because they already built the counters to the units that you're making. So instead of that, do the other things. Or what makes more sense here, because of what they built, is just invest like less money and just build pork here with T2. So your hounds are like 3,000 metal. You've already lost a few of them. A rattle is 2,500. I think if you put like a rattle and 2 pit bulls, they wouldn't be able to push really at all. And then you could even have like a lab for, tick spam or something just for vision. You could even like double rattle if you were feeling crazy. But I think trying to make hounds into units that already counter them just isn't what you really want to do here. Your king inside is winning right over here. So you do want to apply pressure. So maybe porking isn't the best thing, but what would probably make more sense is tick spamming up into this with snipers and a jammer and then just trying to pick off the Tsars. But again, everything here is awful versus spam. You could just kill all of this with tick spam and there's nothing they could do about it. They'd have to make other units. Also, as a side note, Core 2 vehicle lab is the worst lab in the entire game, and it's awful against spam. The only thing that's decent against spam in it are salamanders, and they don't really want to make salas on this because they can't abuse their move def very much. So that's another reason why you would want to go tick spam here. Okay, we're gonna make the swap to snipers now. I like this. So sniper, welder, hound. Just get rid of the hounds entirely and just go sniper, welder. You could go like a 1-2 or even like a 1-1 is fine. Other thing we see here, okay? Your blue player has a ton of fighters. The enemy player has fighters, yes, but he's making bombers and he's making gunships. That means that he's not going to be able to compete in terms of sheer fighter count with your other player. So something you could do in this situation as well that works well is if you pork this with like, rattlesnake, pitbull, maybe, like a beamer, something like that. You just pork the front. You can just go air, right? You have more than enough energy and more than enough metal production. Just go air and just start making bombers. This guy isn't like already, if you do 2v1 air, you're ahead, right? And it's really likely you'll be able to bomb. But on top of that, he already has to make stuff like gunships to try to fight over here. So he's already at an economic disadvantage versus blue. So when you see these situations where the enemy air swaps into something other than fighters and bombers, it's a good idea for you as someone who isn't the air player to make the consideration of, hey, should I swap to air? Because if I do, I might be able to bomb, right? And this is like, isn't a really high skilled lobby. So people might not have huge Aphis farms, but I bet there's still, let's see. So he has 23 T1 fighters, right? And he has 6 T2 fighters. And your ally has, why is your ally armed? Sweet Jesus. Your ally has like you wouldn't even need to make fighters. You could just go straight bomber. You could just bomb. And if you scouted it, you could see, right? So like you could pop that, you could pop this APHIS, you could, you know, that this is an OP layout. You would pop this and you just end the game as soon as it dies. So just another consideration to take in when you see enemy air doing that. Think about swapping out into another unit combo. And is that 3 rattlesnakes? Good God. Yeah, so you're making like skirmishing, like mid-range skirmishing units into long-range artillery units, which you kind of never want to do. All that stuff just dies with tick spam. I'm not going to say it again. I will not repeat myself anymore. So yeah, just pork that and go air. Or to be honest, the ARM T2 bot lab really isn't that great if you're using spy bots. So I would probably eat it, build another APHIS, and you could either go T3 or you could swap into ARM vehicles. You could probably break this with like bulls. All right, so here comes the bombing run. This is all of Red's fighters. So Blue just completely killed. What is he doing? Oh, he's scouting? Well, that's not what he should do, because if people are smart, they'll have flak and he'll just throw away all of his fighters. But yeah. Blue won. There's no opposing enemy air. If you just build an air lab, like if you'd built an air lab before when you saw the trigger for it over here, or like even if you just do it now, you just have a free bombing run and you could just go end the game. You could just go kill eco. As a general rule, like, yes, you're playing on the front. You want to try to like save the front and fight units on the front and everything. But games very rarely end here. Games very commonly end here. Meaning that killing 20,000 metal worth of units here is never the same as killing 20,000 units worth of metal here, right? If you can pop eco, more than likely you'll be able to carry the game. So try not to think about like quote unquote winning the front. Like, what are you guys fighting for here? There's like a couple mexes, but you guys are already on APHIS, right? Like, you know, this is basically 2 metal a second with the T2 mex. It's 8 metal a second. An APHIS, generally speaking, can power 4 converters, which is 40 metal a second. Just because you don't own this territory doesn't mean it's a problem, right? You don't need to push into it. If anything, like if you wanted to stay ground, you can pork it like we talked about, and you could just send your army over here, right? Like, why even fight here if they committed so much metal into defenses, right? This is like 15,000 metal into rattlesnakes. You don't have to fight it. Just go around it, you know, go air and bomb, go, you know, run with your ally over here. Like if you sent spy bots and empty these razors, you just end the game. Okay. So this is, I assume, is more or less over. I think the replay was like 29 minutes long, so I'm assuming you guys win soon. So let me just do kind of like a really brief recap. I think your single biggest issue is just econ, because I feel like there's a ton of inefficiency, especially around your tier 2 transition, that if you can clean that up, you'll do much, much better. On a map like Glitters, if you're ARM, you almost never want to make a solars. You can make a few solars when the wind is low, right? Because solars are basic solars are the only building that you get 100% return on, right? I don't think anyone has any. Oh, he has a basic solar, right? Basic solars, 150 metal and 0 energy. Whenever you reclaim a building, you get all the metal back, you get none of the energy back. They don't cost any energy. So it's totally fine for you to just build a bunch of solars if your wind is low at the start, and then just spam wind, right? You can see, like, you'll see good players who are playing on Glitters. If they're back here, there's like a wind farm here, a wind farm here, a wind farm here. a wind farm here, a wind farm here. And then they'll leave this space in case they need to scale with Aphis or something else. But you can just have a bunch of cons just spamming E in the back, and then you'll come out ahead because you don't need to reclaim your windmills. The solars that you built are 5,000 energy, and they only produce 75 E a second, right? They take forever to pay for themselves. And you ended up eating them to fund your fusions and your, well, not your fusion, but your advanced fusion, right? You don't need to eat that wind. It'll just be on the side, and it just produces, it helps you scale much, much quicker. So first, if you're on glitters, you want to be spamming wind. You also overflowed into your team like forever. Don't do that. Your team loves you. They're like, thank you. We love your inefficiency. Give us all of your energy. But that's just not how you want to win games. So instead, make sure you're converting all of your energy. You want to be, like you want all of these to be firing on yellow. If they aren't yellow, if they're your player color, it means that they're not firing, but just keep building them until you see them stop firing. You also really, really need e-storage, especially relatively early on. And then when you do your T2 transition, always try to get T2 like 6 to 7 minutes, right? You had the metal the whole time. If you got the T2 and a trans and flew it over, you probably could have had this advanced fusion like 10 minutes earlier than you had it. Right? But it was just kind of like an inefficiency thing where you're like spamming T1 on the front and you just hadn't done the conversion. Instead, get the T2 con, bring it over, upgrade these 3 mexes. If you aren't getting pushed, drop the fusion and then upgrade the rest of your mexes and just walk them all the way up to the front, right? And make sure you have a bunch of T1 cons following him so that when he's out here where you don't have BP assigned, he can do that. And then you also really need anti-nuke. Only one person on your team has anti-nuke. When you start playing versus good players, a nuke rush will hit like 13 minutes or so. I mean, if they co-op it, it's like way early, but that's pretty rare. But you kind of always want to have anti-nuke around 13 minutes. Right now, someone can just nuke like right here. And if it's a core nuke, they'll just kill both of you, which is not what you want, right? So after your first fusion, get in the habit of anti-nuke, anti-stealth. And then in terms of your unit comp, I think that on the front, you want to try to, once you get T2, you really want to pork your front. Hounds are awesome units at the beginning of T2, but once you start fighting long range stuff, you have to stop making them. They're just useless versus all of this, especially versus the rattlesnakes. The number of hounds that you would need to have to break this many rattlesnakes is just like insane. It just won't happen. So when you see czars and rattles and everything else, you either need to have spy bots to emp them, or you just need to pork yourself and then like go sniper. You can get like 4 snipers with a jammer and, put the jammer like here. And if they don't have vision of the jammer, you can cloak the snipers up on hold fire and then just one tap the rattlesnake and then run away. Right? That would have been a much better thing to do. You could also just go vehicles and just get, a couple ambassadors, like 3 ambassadors. I think we'll just one shot. 3 ambassadors, one shot a rattlesnake. They do 1900 damage. So you could have just done that and then just killed them off individually instead of going hound. But yeah, that's it. I guess we can speed it up and watch the end. They're going to push in with Mausers. They're going to complain about balance. You guys still aren't going to be able to break yellow. Ally's going to nuke nothing. And I assume that's the end of the game. So focus on really your eco, your conversion, and try to really focus on your T2 transition. I think that's like the biggest issue that you had. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know.